When three truckers cornered Sarah Mitchell in the back booth, making crude comments and blocking her exit, they saw only a woman dining alone. What they didn't know was that Sergeant Mitchell had served 3 tours as a military police officer. Now, as she shifted her stance, years of combat training were about to be demonstrated. The fluorescent lights of the Big Rig Stop diner cast a harsh glow across the worn linoleum floor as Sarah Mitchell slides into the corner booth, her back to the wall, eyes automatically scanning the room. It's a habit ingrained through 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. Never sit with your back to the door, always know your exits. The late-night crowd is sparse. An elderly couple finishing their meal, a solitary truck driver nursing coffee at the counter, and the young waitress wiping down tables with mechanical efficiency. "Coffee black," Sarah orders when the waitress approaches, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without raising her tone. The girl, Jenny, according to her name tag, nods and disappears behind the counter. To the casual observer, Sarah might appear to be just another weary traveler stopping for a late meal on the endless stretch of Montana highway. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, jeans and a simple grey t-shirt revealing athletic arms, but nothing that screams military. Only the disciplined posture and the way her eyes track each person entering the diner suggests something different about this 38-year-old woman. Sarah checks her watch, a rugged tactical timepiece that survived sandstorms, firefights, and close-quarters combat training. 11:37 p.m., 5 hours since she'd left Billings, heading west toward a new life in Washington. 5 hours of open road and memories she's still trying to outrun. Jenny returns with coffee and a menu. "Kitchen closes at midnight," she says, her voice carrying the particular weariness that comes from being on your feet for too many hours. "Just the special," Sarah responds, noticing the slight tremor in the waitress's hands, the dark circles under her eyes. Military police training had taught Sarah to read people quickly. This woman is exhausted, stressed, probably working multiple jobs. The bell above the door jingles, drawing Sarah's attention. 3 men enter, their heavy boots tracking mud across the floor, their voices too loud for the quiet diner. The lead man, bearded, heavy-set with tattooed forearms and a Ravens trucking cap, surveys the room with the entitled swagger of someone accustomed to intimidating others. His companions flank him, similar builds but younger, one with a skull bandana tied around his neck, the other with a chain wallet that clinks with each step. Sarah catalogues the details automatically. Lead subject approximately 240 pounds, favoring his right side. Possible knee injury based on gait. Secondary subjects both carrying concealed objects in right jacket pockets, not displaying weapon profiles, but possible tools or non-lethal threats. Behavior pattern suggests coordinated group accustomed to dominating environments. The assessment takes seconds, a skill honed through years of military checkpoint operations where threat identification meant survival. Sarah sips her coffee, gaze lowered, but awareness heightened as the men claim the largest booth, deliberately scraping chairs across the floor. "Hey, sweetheart!" the leader calls out to Jenny, voice laced with false sweetness. "3 coffees, and don't be stingy with the pie this time." Jenny's shoulders tense visibly, but she plasters on a professional smile and moves toward the counter. Sarah notices how the young woman deliberately takes the long route, avoiding close proximity to the men's table. The manager, a balding man with nervous hands, emerges briefly from the kitchen, assesses the new arrivals, and retreats without comment. His body language screams conflict avoidance. Sarah's food arrives, a simple plate of meatloaf and potatoes that she positions carefully, ensuring her hands remain free. She eats methodically while maintaining situational awareness, a skill learned in combat zones where complacency could be fatal. Through her peripheral vision, she tracks the 3 truckers, noting their increasing volume, the way they spread out to dominate the space, their deliberate intimidation of the waitress with each interaction. "Ain't seen you here before," the leader comments loudly, looking directly at Sarah. "Pretty lady like you shouldn't be traveling alone." Sarah doesn't respond, doesn't even acknowledge the comment. Another technique from her training: deny engagement, provide no feedback, offer no encouragement. The trucker with the skull, bandana, laughs, a harsh sound that cuts through the diner's quiet atmosphere. "Maybe she's deaf," he suggests to his companions, voice pitched deliberately to carry. The elderly couple finishes their meal, the man helping his wife into her coat. Sarah notices how they hurry their movements, heads down, clearly uncomfortable with the trucker's presence. The husband leaves cash on the table, avoiding the direct path past the trucker's booth. "Drive safe now," the leader calls after them, voice carrying a subtle menace that makes the old man flinch as he guides his wife through the door. Sarah focuses on her meal, but her mind is calculating scenarios, escape routes, improvised weapons within reach. Standard situational assessment, just like the convoy protection protocols she drilled countless times with her MP unit. The heavy ceramic mug offers impact potential. The steak knife provides slashing capability, but risks escalation. Hot. Coffee creates distraction opportunity. The truckers grow louder, their comments to Jenny becoming increasingly crude. The young waitress keeps her eyes down, hands trembling slightly as she refills their cups. When the leader grabs her wrist to prevent her from moving away, Sarah's posture shifts subtly, muscles tensing in preparation, though her expression remains neutral. "Why don't you sit with us a while?" the trucker suggests, not releasing Jenny's wrist despite her obvious discomfort. "Slow night. Bet you could use the company." "I have other customers," Jenny responds, voice barely audible as she attempts to pull away. "Don't see nobody important." The trucker with the chain wallet counters, gaze deliberately shifting to Sarah, sizing her up, dismissing her. "Just some woman eating alone." Sarah continues her meal, seemingly oblivious to their attention, but internally she's already mapped each man's position, assessed their likely threat capabilities, and calculated optimal response patterns. It's automatic, the result of years specialized training in threat neutralization and civilian protection. The leader finally releases Jenny's wrist, but his eyes follow her movement with predatory focus. Then, as if making a decision, he turns his full attention to Sarah. "Hey, darling," he calls across the diner. "Why don't you join us? Make the night more interesting." Sarah raises her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. Something in her steady look, the complete absence of fear, the cold assessment in her eyes, causes the slightest flicker of uncertainty to cross the trucker's face, but he dismisses it instantly, exchanging smirks with his companions. They've chosen their target for the night. Completely unaware, they've just challenged a woman with 7 years of military police experience, advanced close-quarters combat training, and 3 combat tours protecting civilians from individuals. Far more dangerous than 3 truckers with inflated egos. Sarah takes another bite of meatloaf, her movements calm and deliberate. The night is about to get interesting. Sarah cuts her meatloaf with precise movements, each slice exactly the same size, a habit from military life where even meals were executed with discipline. A position in the corner booth gives her optimal sightlines to monitor the 3 truckers, without appearing to watch them. Their behavior follows a familiar pattern she's seen countless times. Predators testing boundaries, establishing dominance over what they perceive as weaker targets. The leader, Raven's trucking cap, approximately 240 pounds, tactical designation Alpha in Sarah's mental assessment, slaps the table hard enough to make cutlery jump when Jenny passes without immediately refilling their coffee. The young waitress flinches, nearly dropping her serving tray. "Said we needed refills, girl," Alpha calls out, his companions laughing on cue. "You deaf or just stupid?" Jenny hurries to grab the coffee pot, her hands visibly shaking. "Sorry, sir." "Right away." Sarah notes the subtle changes in the diner's atmosphere. The lone trucker at the counter pays his bill quickly and leaves. The cook peers out from the kitchen with concerned eyes, but retreats when Alpha makes eye contact with him. The pattern is clear. These men have established this diner as their territory, and no one is willing to challenge them. As Jenny approaches their table, the trucker with the skull bandana, beta in Sarah's assessment, deliberately moves his foot into her path. Sarah immediately recognizes the setup, having seen similar tactics during her second deployment in Kandahar. "Watch your step," Sarah says, her voice carrying across the diner with calm authority. All eyes turn to her in surprise as Jenny manages to step over the extended boot, coffee pot still steady. "Mind your own business, lady," Beta snaps, but Sarah notices how he quickly withdraws his foot. Jenny flashes Sarah a grateful glance before refilling the trucker's mugs. Sarah returns to her meal, but her senses remain heightened, tracking minute details. The way Alpha's hand moves to his right pocket when irritated, suggesting a concealed item. How the third trucker, Gamma designation, keeps watching the parking lot through the window, possibly indicating a vehicle of significance. A memory surfaces from her training at Fort Leonard Wood. Captain Davis drilling her unit on threat assessment in civilian environments. Recognizing pre-assault indicators is what separates survivors from victims, he'd said. Catalog behavior. Patterns. Establish baseline. Note deviations. Sarah does exactly that now, building a comprehensive threat profile as she eats. The truckers have established a triangular dominance pattern in the diner, positioned to control the main exit and counter access. Their harassment follows an escalating timeline, targeting the waitress with increasing aggression approximately every 7 minutes. When Alpha makes a crude gesture toward Jenny's retreating form, Sarah carefully places her fork on her plate and reaches for her coffee. The slight adjustment provides better access to the heavy mug, an improvised impact weapon if needed. "Gonna need some pie, sweetheart," Alpha calls to Jenny. "Come here and tell us what's sweet tonight." Jenny approaches reluctantly. Order. Pad clutched like a shield. "We have apple and cherry." Alpha grabs her wrist again, harder this time. "Wasn't talking about the menu, honey. Please, I need to serve the other customer," Jenny says, trying to pull away without causing a scene. "Her?" Gamma jerks his thumb toward Sarah. "She ain't in any hurry, are you, darling?" Sarah meets Jenny's eyes briefly, giving an almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. She's evaluated the situation's escalation trajectory and calculated appropriate response thresholds. "Let her go," Sarah says calmly, not a request but a statement of fact. She's trying to do her job. The diner falls completely silent. Alpha slowly turns his head toward Sarah, exaggerated disbelief on his face. "Well, would you listen to that? Lady's got an opinion." He releases Jenny's wrist with a slight push. "Why don't you bring us our pie, then scurry over to your guard dog there?" Alpha rises from his seat, making a show of stretching before sauntering toward Sarah's booth. 6'2", favoring right leg, reduced mobility but significant upper body mass. His companions remain seated but shift position to maintain sightlines. Coordinated movement, suggesting previous group confrontations. "Got a problem with how we talk to the help?" Alpha asks, stopping at the edge of Sarah's table, deliberately invading her space. Sarah looks up, meeting his gaze with the steady calm that once stared down insurgents at checkpoints. Just suggested, "She needs to serve everyone." Nothing personal. Her voice remains neutral, neither challenging nor submissive. "Sounded personal to me." Alpha plants both palms on her table, leaning forward. The aggressive posture is intended to intimidate through height advantage and physical proximity. "Not my intention," Sarah responds, neither leaning away nor challenging the intrusion. Her hands remain visible on the table, a deliberate, non-threatening posture that nevertheless leaves her perfectly positioned to react if necessary. "Just trying to enjoy my meal." Alpha studies her for a moment, trying to reconcile her calm response with his expectation of fear. Sarah can almost see him recalculating, uncertain how to process her composed demeanor. "Where you headed? All alone at this time of night?" he asks, voice shifting to false concern. "West," Sarah offers the single word, providing no useful information. While technically answering his question, another technique from her interrogation resistance training. Alpha straightens up, maintaining eye contact for another moment before returning to his companions. Sarah observes their huddled conversation, the glances in her direction, the newly cautious assessment. Jenny detours to Sarah's table under the pretense of refilling coffee. "Thank you," she whispers, her voice barely audible. They come in. Every week, nobody ever stands up to them. Sarah offers a small nod. "How long until you close?" 30 minutes, Jenny replies, glancing nervously at the truckers. "But they never leave when we ask. Sometimes they stay for hours." Sarah absorbs this new intelligence, factoring it into her situation assessment. The pattern suggests escalation will continue after closing when fewer witnesses remain. "Just focus on your job," Sarah advises, quietly. "Don't engage more than necessary." The three truckers are watching her with new interest, reassessing their initial dismissal of the solitary woman in the corner booth. They've sensed something different about her, but haven't yet identified. What? Sarah knows this momentary confusion won't last long. Soon, they'll either retreat to seek easier targets, or more likely escalate to re-establish dominance. Either way, Sarah Mitchell is prepared. She's faced worse odds in Afghanistan with nothing but a sidearm and her training. The fluorescent lights flicker momentarily as Sarah finishes her meal, a brief interruption that goes unnoticed by most patrons, but registers immediately in her tactical awareness. She catalogues it automatically: potential electrical issues, possible impact on visibility if confrontation occurs, adjustment needed for any low-light scenario. Years of combat zone operations had programmed her to process environmental changes as potential variables in threat assessment. Alpha returns to his companions, but their conversation has shifted, less boisterous, more focused, with deliberate glances towards Sarah. Their body language has changed subtly, transitioning from random intimidation to targeted interest. She's become the objective, exactly as she intended. Better her than Jenny or the remaining patrons. "More coffee, miss?" Jenny approaches with the pot, her voice steadier now, drawing confidence from Sarah's presence. "Thanks," Sarah responds, pushing her cup forward. "Everything okay in the kitchen?" The question is casual but deliberate, gathering intelligence about potential allies or additional threats behind the swinging doors. Jenny understands immediately. "Just Mark," she answers quietly. "He doesn't like trouble. Won't call the police unless something's broken." Sarah nods once, filing away this confirmation of no immediate backup. With practiced efficiency, she's mentally mapped the diner's layout, catalogued available resources, and calculated optimum defensive positions should intervention become necessary. The bell above the door chimes as a middle-aged couple enters. Looking road-weary, Alpha immediately shifts his attention, exchanging meaningful glances with his companions. Sarah recognizes the predatory assessment: new potential targets, calculation of vulnerability, opportunity evaluation. "Take the booth by the window," Sarah suggests to the couple as they hesitate near the entrance, her voice carrying just enough authority to make it sound like experienced advice rather than a command. The position she's indicated would place them furthest from the truckers and closest to the exit. Alpha's eyes narrow at her intervention. Challenge registered, response incoming. Sarah maintains her relaxed posture while mentally shifting to heightened alert status, the same combat readiness state she'd maintained at checkpoints in Kandahar province. She doesn't have to wait long. "Think you own the place now?" Alpha pushes away from his table, moving towards Sarah with deliberate slowness. His companions spread out slightly, taking flanking positions that suggest practiced intimidation tactics. Telling folks where to sit, Sarah meets his gaze directly, neither challenging nor submissive, just suggesting the view's better by the window. Know what I think? Alpha stops at her table, closer than social norms would dictate, deliberately, invading her personal space. Think you need to learn some manners. Women shouldn't interrupt men's conversations. Sarah catalogues the escalation indicators: increased proximity, direct confrontation language, physical intimidation posture, response threshold approaching but not yet reached. Not trying to interrupt anything, she says calmly, just finishing my meal. Alpha places one heavy hand on her table, leaning down. His breath carries the sour smell of beer beneath coffee. Maybe you need company. Gets lonely eating by yourself. The implied threat hangs in the air between them. Beta and Gamma have positioned themselves to block casual observation from the kitchen and have sightlines to the entrance. Coordinated positioning that confirms Sarah's assessment of practiced intimidation tactics. I prefer to eat alone, Sarah responds, her voice carrying no emotion despite the adrenaline now entering her system, another skill honed through years of high-stress military operations. That so? Alpha reaches out suddenly, gripping her wrist with unexpected speed. His hand completely encircles her forearm, applying pressure intended to demonstrate physical dominance. Pretty woman like you shouldn't be so unfriendly. Contact threshold exceeded. Sarah's military training kicks in automatically, but she modulates her response. This isn't combat yet, just physical intimidation testing her boundaries. She neither pulls away nor retaliates, instead locking eyes with Alpha, her body perfectly still despite the painful grip. You'll want to remove your hand, she states quietly, each word precisely measured. Not a request, not a threat, simply a factual statement delivered with absolute certainty. Something in her tone, the complete absence of fear, the implicit confidence, causes Alpha to hesitate. People typically respond to physical intimidation with either panic or angry bluster. Sarah's controlled reaction doesn't fit the pattern, triggering subconscious warning signals his conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Or what? He challenges, but there's a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. Sarah maintains eye contact, her breathing controlled, her posture balanced despite the awkward position, or I'll remove it for you. The simplicity of her response, delivered without emotion or bravado, creates momentary confusion. Alpha reflexively tightens his grip, applying pain as a default response to resistance. What happens next occurs so quickly that Jenny, watching anxiously from behind the counter, barely registers the movement. Sarah executes a perfect joint. Manipulation countermeasure. Her free hand striking a precise pressure point while simultaneously twisting her captured wrist in a direction that hyperextends Alpha's thumb. The technique, perfected through thousands of training repetitions, forces his grip to release involuntarily. Alpha jerks back, more surprised than hurt, staring at his hand as if it had betrayed him. What the hell? Like I said, Sarah interrupts, calmly, returning to her coffee as if nothing unusual had occurred. I prefer to eat alone. Beta steps forward, hand moving toward his pocket, but Alpha raises his arm slightly, halting him. The leader's expression has transformed from annoyed to focused, reassessing the woman before him with new calculation. You got lucky, Alpha says finally, flexing his hand. Won't happen twice. Sarah doesn't respond, doesn't watch them retreat to their table, though she tracks their movements through peripheral vision and sound. The confrontation has entered a new phase. They now recognize her as something other than an easy target, but pride demands they reassert dominance. The next approach will be more coordinated, potentially more violent. She's faced similar escalation patterns at military checkpoints. Initial testing, followed by retreat and regrouping, then committed engagement. Jenny approaches cautiously. Are you okay? She whispers, glancing nervously at the truckers now huddled in conversation. Fine, Sarah responds, her voice steady. But you should stay behind the counter for a while. Alpha slams his hand down on his table, making everyone in the diner jump except Sarah. Check! He shouts, eyes fixed on Sarah with newfound intensity. "Unless you're offering free meals for putting up with rude customers." Jenny hurries to prepare their bill, hands trembling again. Sarah remains motionless, mentally preparing for what comes next. The truckers' behavior has shifted from random intimidation to focused hostility. They won't leave without attempting to re-establish dominance. Their reputation and self-image demand it. Sarah finishes her coffee, her mind calculating defense scenarios with military precision. The truckers watch her every move now, their earlier dismissive attitude replaced by concentrated attention. The battle lines have been drawn. Sarah Mitchell, former military police with specialized close-quarters combat training, has been identified as a threat to their established pattern of intimidation. What they still don't understand is just how significant a threat she truly is. The diner's atmosphere grows increasingly tense as the clock inches toward midnight. Sarah remains at her booth, seemingly relaxed as she nurses her third cup of coffee, but her senses are tuned to every movement, every subtle shift in the trucker's demeanor. The middle-aged couple who entered earlier finish their meal quickly, heads lowered, clearly sensing the hostile environment. As they approach the register to pay, Alpha deliberately pushes his chair back, blocking their path. "Leaving so soon?" he asks, voice dripping with false disappointment. "Night's just getting started." The husband, a thin man in his 60s, keeps his eyes down. "Just passing through, long drive tomorrow." "Ain't safe driving these roads at night," Beta adds, exchanging meaningful glances with Alpha. "Lots of dangerous folks out there." The wife clutches her husband's arm, fear evident in her rigid posture. Sarah watches the interaction, recognizing the escalation pattern. The truckers, temporarily thwarted in their intimidation of her, are redirecting aggression toward easier targets. "Excuse us, please," the husband mumbles, attempting to edge past Alpha's extended legs. Alpha doesn't move. "What's the rush, old-timer? Worried about bedtime?" Sarah places her coffee cup down with deliberate precision. The sound, though quiet, draws Alpha's attention momentarily, exactly as intended. In that brief window of distraction, she makes eye contact with the husband and subtly gestures toward the gap between tables. The man understands immediately, guiding his wife through the opening before Alpha can reposition. "Good night, Sarah." It calls to the couple as they hurry toward the door, her calm voice a stark contrast to the tension filling the diner. "Drive safely." The implied message is clear to everyone. She's placed herself between the truckers and the departing couple, establishing protective coverage. Alpha's jaw tightens at the deliberate challenge to his dominance display. "Ain't done with you," he growls as the couple disappears through the door. Sarah says nothing, maintaining her composed demeanor while mentally calculating the changed tactical situation. Two fewer civilians to protect, but the truckers' aggression is escalating faster than anticipated after their failed intimidation attempts. Jenny emerges from the kitchen with a fresh pot of coffee, her path taking her past the trucker's table. Gamma extends his foot slightly, not enough to trip her but sufficient to force an awkward step. As she stumbles, he grabs her arm, coffee sloshing dangerously in the pot. "Careful there," he says, grip tightening around her upper arm. "Wouldn't want anyone getting burned." "Please let go," Jenny whispers, her face pale. "I need to clean up before closing." "Maybe we don't want you to close," Alpha interjects. "Maybe we're enjoying the service." Jenny's eyes dart towards Sarah, a silent plea for help. The manager remains conspicuously absent, clearly avoiding confrontation. "The diner closes at midnight," Sarah states, her voice carrying calm authority. "Policies clearly posted on the door." Alpha turns toward her, irritation plainly visible. "You running this place now?" "Just stating facts," Sarah responds evenly. "Let her finish her work." Gamma releases Jenny's arm with a slight push that nearly sends her stumbling again. "Coffee's cold anyway," he complains, shoving his cup toward her. As Jenny retreats behind the counter, Sarah notices the slight tremor in the young woman's hands has intensified. A new variable enters her tactical assessment. Jenny is approaching her fear threshold, increasing the risk of unpredictable responses if the situation deteriorates further. "You got a kid, don't you, Jenny?" Alpha calls out, his voice carrying deliberate menace. "Little boy lives with your mother while you work nights?" The color drains from Jenny's face. Sarah registers the escalation immediately. They've moved from general intimidation to specific personal threats, a significant threshold breach in her threat assessment matrix. "How's a single mom make ends meet these days?" Alpha continues, watching Jenny's reaction with predatory satisfaction. "Must be tough, especially if something happened to your job." The implication hangs heavy in the air. Sarah shifts slightly, angling her body for optimal response positioning, while maintaining her outwardly calm demeanor. "Sheriff's station is 40 minutes out," Jenny whispers when she passes Sarah's table, voice barely audible. "Mark won't uncall them anyway, says they're not worth the trouble." "How often do they come here?" Sarah asks quietly. "Every Tuesday and Friday," Jenny replies, eyes downcast. "They've followed waitresses to their cars before. Last month Diane quit after they cornered her in the parking lot." Sarah processes this new intelligence, incorporating it into her tactical analysis. The pattern suggests practiced predatory behavior escalating over time with established methodology. "For isolating targets, when does your shift end?" Sarah keeps her voice low. "Should be midnight, but they never leave on time." Jenny glances nervously at the clock showing 11:42. "I'm supposed to clean up after closing, but sometimes I'm here until 2 if they stay." "You have a way home." "My car. It's around back." Her voice catches. "They've slashed tires before when girls complained." Alpha rises suddenly, pushing his chair back with unnecessary force. His companions follow suit, spreading out slightly as they approach Sarah's booth from 3 angles, a coordinated flanking maneuver designed to eliminate retreat options. "Time we had a proper chat about restaurant manners," Alpha announces, loud enough for everyone to hear. His right hand slips into his jacket pocket, emerging with brass knuckles now fitted over his fingers. Sarah remains seated, her posture relaxed despite the imminent threat, her mind calculating angles, distances, and response options with military precision. The confrontation has reached critical threshold. Physical violence now probable. Time to show these men exactly why they've made a catastrophic error in judgment. Sarah remains perfectly still as the 3 truckers surround her booth, her breathing controlled and steady despite the adrenaline now flooding her system. She catalogues each man's position with practiced precision, Alpha directly in front wearing brass knuckles, Beta to her left with hand resting on what appears to be a folding knife in his pocket, Gamma blocking the rightward escape route, something concealed in his closed fist. "Stand up," Alpha commands, towering over her table. "Show some respect when a man's talking to you." Sarah weighs her options with cold calculation. Standing would surrender her protected position within the booth and place her at a tactical disadvantage. Remaining seated maintains defensive coverage while limiting their attack angles. "I'm comfortable here," she responds, voice betraying no emotion. "Say what you need to say." Alpha's jaw tightens at the refusal. "Wasn't a request." He reaches across the table with unexpected speed, grabbing Sarah's jacket collar and pulling upward. Contact threshold exceeded. Response authorized. What happens next occurs in a precisely executed sequence that appears as a single fluid movement to the stunned onlookers. Sarah allows the upward momentum from Alpha's pull, but redirects it, simultaneously grasping his wrist with her left hand, while her right executes a perfect counter-pressure strike to the radial nerve bundle at his forearm. The pain compliance technique causes his grip to release involuntarily, but Sarah maintains control of his wrist, twisting it in a direction that hyperextends his elbow joint. Alpha finds himself suddenly off balance, upper body pulled downward. Across the table by his own captured arm, coffee cups scattering. The position neutralizes the brass knuckles by removing his punching leverage while exposing him to Sarah's controlled counter-pressure. He stumbles backward, knife hand instinctively dropping to grab his injured leg. Gamma hesitates just long enough for Sarah to release Alpha with a controlled push that sends him stumbling into his approaching companion. The momentary confusion gives her the opening to slide from the booth, establishing optimal positioning with her back to the wall, all three opponents now in her field of vision. Alpha regains his balance, rage replacing shock on his face. "You're dead, bitch," he snarls, advancing again with brass knuckles raised. Sarah stands in perfect combat stance, hands positioned defensively, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. "Final warning," she states, voice carrying the same calm authority that once commanded military checkpoints. "Walk away now." Alpha charges forward, swinging a wild haymaker that telegraphs his intentions to anyone with combat training. Sarah doesn't attempt to block the powerful blow. Instead, she steps inside his attack radius, deflecting his arm while simultaneously executing a precision strike to his solar plexus. The targeted impact momentarily paralyzes his diaphragm, leaving him gasping for air as she pivots away from his collapsing form. Beta recovers enough to lunge forward with his knife, but the movement is clumsy, compromised by his injured knee. Sarah controls the knife hand with a textbook wrist lock, applying specific pressure to the radial nerve that causes involuntary finger extension. The knife clatters to the floor as Beta drops to one knee, joint manipulation forcing his compliance. "Stay down," she commands, applying just enough pressure to maintain control without causing permanent damage. A technique perfected through years of military police training focused on suspect restraint rather than elimination. Gamma, witnessing his companion's efficient neutralization, hesitates before revealing his concealed weapon, a heavy chain wrapped around his fist. His moment of indecision gives Sarah the tactical advantage as she releases Beta with a controlled push that sends him sliding across the floor. "Don't," Sarah warns Gamma, her stance adjusted to address the new threat vector. Her response is a precisely targeted strike to the brachial plexus, the nerve cluster where neck meets shoulder, executed with controlled force, calculated to cause temporary motor dysfunction without permanent injury. Gamma drops to his knees, chain falling from suddenly numb fingers, arm hanging uselessly at his side. The entire engagement has taken less than 15 seconds. Alpha struggles to his feet, still fighting for breath, his earlier confidence replaced by confusion and rage. "What the hell are you?" he demands, voice ragged. Sarah maintains her defensive stance, positioning herself between the truckers and the counter where Jenny watches with wide eyes. "Someone who's giving you one last chance to leave peacefully," she responds, voice steady despite elevated heart rate. "This isn't over," Alpha threatens, helping Beta to his feet while eyeing his fallen companion. "It is for tonight," Sarah counters, her calm confidence more intimidating than any threat. "Could be. Take your friends and go." Alpha hesitates, clearly torn between pride and self-preservation. The calculated precision of Sarah's defensive techniques has revealed the opponent far beyond his experience, someone trained specifically in the controlled neutralization of multiple aggressive targets. "Let's go," he finally growls to his companions, the temporary retreat clearly tactical rather than final. "Got better things to do than waste time here." Sarah maintains her position as the truckers gather their wounded pride along with their fallen companion, backing toward the door with murderous glares promising future retribution. The confrontation has been contained, but Sarah harbors no illusions about it being resolved. Their behavior pattern suggests they'll regroup, possibly acquire additional weapons or allies, then return seeking revenge for the public humiliation. Next time, they won't underestimate her. Sarah maintains her defensive position until the truckers' taillights disappear into the darkness, their angry voices still audible in the parking lot. Only when she's certain of their departure does she allow her combat stance to relax slightly, though her situational awareness remains heightened. The immediate threat has been neutralized, but tactical experience tells her this confrontation is far from over. "Are you okay?" Jenny approaches cautiously, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "I've never seen anyone." "How did you—" "I'm fine," Sarah assures her, scanning the diner for additional threats or injured civilians. "Anyone else?" "Hurt?" The cook, Mark, emerges from the kitchen, having finally found his courage now that the danger has passed. "Should I call the sheriff?" he asks, eyes darting nervously toward the door. "They'll be back before any deputies arrive," Sarah states matter-of-factly, moving to retrieve Beta's dropped knife with a napkin, preserving fingerprints by habit. "But yes, report the incident. Document the weapons." Her mind is already calculating probable scenarios. The trucker's retreat was tactical, not final. Wounded pride combined with clear intoxication creates high probability of escalated retaliation. Standard threat response requires securing the perimeter, controlling access points, and establishing defensive positions. "Need to lock up," Sarah instructs, moving toward the windows to assess exterior sightlines. "Turn off half the interior. Lights. Maintain visibility but reduce exposure from outside. Any other exits besides the front and kitchen?" Mark and Jenny exchange confused glances, civilian minds struggling to process her rapid tactical analysis. "There's a back door by the freezer," Mark offers finally. "Check it. Ensure it's secure," Sarah directs, falling naturally into command mode. Her eyes catch movement in the parking lot, headlights approaching slowly, engine running but vehicle remaining at distance. They're staging outside. Standard intimidation tactic. The truck's high beams suddenly illuminate the diner's interior, light sweeping across the windows in deliberate patterns designed to disorient and intimidate those inside. Sarah immediately positions herself away from direct light exposure, maintaining visibility while avoiding being backlit. "Get down," she orders as the first object strikes a window. A beer bottle that bounces off without breaking the glass. "Move away from the windows." Jenny drops behind the counter, while Mark retreats toward the kitchen. Sarah maintains visual coverage of all approaches, noting the positions of the trucks now surrounding the diner. 3 vehicles positioned to control all exit points, headlights creating overlapping fields of illumination. The pattern suggests coordinated deployment rather than random intimidation. "What do they want?" Jenny whispers, fear evident in her voice. "Dominance restoration," Sarah answers clinically. Their social position was challenged. They're establishing tactical superiority through intimidation before re-engaging. Through the glare, she identifies movement, figures approaching from multiple angles, using vehicles for cover. Alpha's voice carries through the night. "Alcohol." Having eroded whatever caution her earlier demonstration might have instilled. "Come on out, bitch. Nobody disrespects us like that." The tactical situation has deteriorated rapidly. Sarah counts at least 5 figures now. The original 3 have recruited reinforcements, likely from their truck stop companions. Multiple weapons visible, chains, pipes, what appears to be a hunting knife reflecting in the headlights. Sarah quickly assesses available resources. The diner's layout offers limited defensive advantages, glass windows creating vulnerability, confined space restricting movement, civilian non-combatants requiring protection. Environmental weapons are abundant, coffee pots, cutlery, furniture, but effective deployment requires creating tactical separation. The first window shatters under the impact of a thrown tire iron. Glass sprays across the nearest booth. As Jenny screams, "Kitchen!" Sarah commands, her voice cutting through the panic with practiced authority. "Move now! Stay low!" As Jenny and Mark scramble toward the relative safety of the kitchen, Sarah retrieves the fallen tire iron. Solid construction, approximately 28 inches, balanced weight distribution. An effective defensive tool when wielded. With proper training, Alpha's face appears at the broken window, features distorted with rage and alcohol. "Nowhere to run now," he shouts, reaching through the broken glass to unlock the window frame. Sarah positions herself with calculated precision, far enough from the window to avoid immediate engagement, close enough to control the entry point. Her stance shifts subtly, right foot back, weight balanced, tire iron held in trained grip that maximizes both defensive coverage and strike capability. The window frame slides open as Alpha begins to climb through, brass knuckles still adorning his right hand. Beta and Gamma flank the window, providing coverage, while 3 additional figures approach the main entrance with what appears to be a battering ram improvised from a fence post. "Last chance," Sarah warns, voice projecting calm authority despite the adrenaline now flooding her system. "Law enforcement has been called. Leave now." Alpha laughs, the sound ugly with promised violence. "Police are 40 minutes out. We'll be done with you in 5. He heaves himself through the window, glass crunching under his boots as he straightens to his full height. The moment his feet touch the floor, Sarah executes her response, not retreating as expected, but advancing in controlled aggression, denying him the opportunity to establish stable footing. The tire iron connects with precise force against his extended brass-knuckled hand, the impact angled to target nerve clusters rather than bone. Alpha howls in pain as the improvised weapon clatters from suddenly numb fingers. "Next one breaks bones," Sarah informs him calmly, already repositioning for multiple opponents as Beta begins climbing through the window. "Your choice." Alpha's response is inarticulate rage as he lunges forward, tactical consideration abandoned in favor of brute force. Sarah pivots, using his momentum against him while delivering a precisely calculated strike to his floating ribs, enough force to disable without causing life-threatening injury. As Alpha crumples, the main door splinters under the improvised battering ram. The confrontation has escalated to full tactical emergency. Sarah Mitchell, former military police with 3 combat tours, stands alone between armed assailants and civilian non-combatants, outnumbered and surrounded. Exactly the kind of situation her training was designed for. The diner erupts into chaos as the door splinters inward, 3 attackers surging through the opening while Beta continues his advance through the broken window. Sarah processes the tactical situation in milliseconds, multiple assailants, confined space, civilians to protect, limited egress options. The assessment triggers her combat training automatically, mind calculating angles, distances, and priority threats with military precision. Alpha clutches his injured side on the floor, temporarily neutralized, but still a potential threat. Sarah. He pivots to face the new danger, tire iron held in practiced grip as she positions herself to control engagement distance. "Jenny, Mark, freezer now!" she commands, voice cutting through the chaos with authoritative clarity. "Lock yourselves in!" The approaching attackers hesitate briefly, not expecting coordinated resistance or tactical commands. That moment of confusion gives Sarah her first advantage. Initiative in combat often determines outcome more than numerical superiority. She capitalizes immediately, advancing toward the lead attacker rather than retreating as they anticipated. The man, bearded, heavyset, carrying a length of chain, falters at her unexpected movement, breaking established attack rhythm. Sarah exploits the disruption, using the tire iron with surgical precision to strike his extended wrist, targeting nerve clusters with practiced accuracy. The chain drops as he recoils in pain, creating momentary obstruction for the men behind him. Sarah maintains forward momentum, using their compressed entry position against them. Multiple attackers funneled through a narrow opening become obstacles to each other when defensive tactics specifically target spatial control. "Stay back," one shouts, brandishing a hunting knife with obvious inexperience. His grip is wrong, stance unbalanced, attention divided. A civilian attempting to mimic combat proficiency without underlying training. Sarah responds not with words, but with a precisely executed combination, deflecting the knife arm while simultaneously delivering a disabling strike to his upper thigh, targeting the femoral nerve bundle with carefully calibrated force. He collapses with a howl of pain, knife skittering across the linoleum as she kicks it away with practiced efficiency. Beta finally clears the window, glass crunching under his boots as he advances from her flank. Sarah registers his approach, peripherally, already adjusting stance to maintain tactical coverage of all threat vectors. Her military training emphasized continuous situational awareness, tracking multiple hostiles while executing sequential neutralization. When Beta lunges, she's already pivoting, using his momentum against him while delivering a precision strike to his previously injured knee. The joint buckles predictably, sending him sprawling across a table that collapses under his weight. "She's just one woman," Alpha shouts from the floor, struggling to regain his feet despite injured ribs. "Rush her together." The remaining attackers exchange uncertain glances, their earlier confidence evaporating as they witness Sarah's controlled, methodical dismantling of their companions. Her stance betrays professional combat training. Balanced, economical, devoid of wasted movement or theatrical flourishes. "Last warning," Sarah states calmly, positioning herself to maintain optimal engagement distance. On the ground, hands visible, or this continues. Their response is predictably aggressive. Two advancing simultaneously from different angles, attempting to divide her attention and defensive capability. It's a sound tactical approach against conventional opponents, but Sarah's combat experience includes specific training for multiple assailant scenarios. She controls engagement sequence with practiced precision, stepping toward the nearer attacker while using the tire iron to establish defensive perimeter. The man hesitates just long enough for Sarah to execute a devastating strike to his solar plexus, calculated force temporarily paralyzing his diaphragm without causing permanent injury. As he crumples, gasping for breath, Sarah immediately pivots to address the second threat, a flanking attack using a broken bottle as improvised weapon. Her response is a textbook defensive sequence, deflecting the bottle arm outward while simultaneously delivering a disabling blow to the attacker's knee joint, followed by a precision strike to the brachial nerve cluster. The bottle shatters harmlessly against the floor as another attacker joins Alpha in the growing collection of neutralized threats. Throughout the engagement, Sarah's breathing remains controlled, her movements economical, her tactical awareness comprehensive, the product of thousands of training hours focused specifically on close-quarters combat against multiple opponents. Beta attempts to rise again, pulling himself up using a nearby booth. Sarah registers the movement without turning, already calculating his approach vector based on sound and peripheral vision. When he lunges, she's prepared, executing a perfect pivot that causes his wild swing to miss entirely while positioning her for optimal counterstrike. The tire iron connects with devastating precision against his extended elbow, the impact carefully calibrated to disable without maiming. Beta collapses again, arm hanging uselessly at his side, the fight thoroughly extinguished from his posture. Alpha remains the only significant threat, having finally regained his feet while Sarah neutralized his companions.